Welcome into another trends and reactions video, this time looking forward to week 13, which should be the last week of the fantasy regular season for most of you. Hope you all had a great Thanksgiving. We got a lot of matchups to get to without any teams on bye, but before we get into it, I want to quick remind you to subscribe to our stream, like the video if you found it helpful, and if you have any comments, please leave them below. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter at NateHenryFF. Again, this is quick, hard-hitting analysis to help you make your waiver decisions, find any trade targets if your trade deadline's not passed, and let's mostly just digest each week's action. Let's get it started off with the Thursday games on Thanksgiving with the Texans versus the Lions. The big news of the week was that Matt Patricia was fired, but don't expect much to change for the Lions offensively now that he's gone, because offensive coordinator Darrell Bevell was named the interim head coach. Kenny Golladay and DeAndre Swift might return soon to provide a boost in playmaking, but the offense should remain pretty similar because Matt Patricia had next to no involvement in the offensive scheme or play calling, and those who did are still around. Washington football team versus the Cowboys. Last week I complimented Dallas on a redesigned offense, but NFL defenses adjust quickly, particularly good defenses like Washington's. Ultimately, the issue for Dallas is offensive line problems. Even with a short, quick passing scheme, Dallas's offensive line allowed 15 quarterback pressures, 9 QB hurries, and 3 sacks on only 35 pass attempts. This offensive line is decimated with injuries, which is a big reason why Andy Dalton and Ezekiel Elliott are struggling. Chargers versus the Bills. Austin Eckler looked great in his first return to action. He was slightly inefficient in the running game, but he was unleashed in the passing game, getting 16 targets. And his day could have been even better if he hadn't been tackled at the 1-yard line, which was converted by Joshua Kelly on the next play. Also, there were apparently no limitations as he played 72% of the snaps, which is about a season average before he got hurt. So if they were limiting his playtime, even better. Titans versus the Colts. Phillip Rivers didn't look quite right to me in this game. He barely completed more than 50% of his passes, and he couldn't find a rhythm with anyone other than Naheem Hines. Hurt worst of all by the poor Rivers play was Michael Pittman, who caught only 2 of 9 targets. We did know that Rivers was fighting a toe injury in this game, so perhaps that impacted his play. Still, you'd expect more out of the passing game when they trailed by so much right from the start and were trailing really big in the second half. The Colts were fighting some COVID issues, so that might have had something to do with the inconsistent play. The point is, I wouldn't be dropping Pittman just yet. The Panthers versus the Vikings. DJ Moore suffered a non-contact injury on Sunday. The injury was completely Teddy Bridgewater's fault because he badly missed a wide open DJ Moore in the end zone, which caused Moore to contort awkwardly in an effort to catch the misfired pass. As of the recording of this video, the injury is considered an ankle injury, so his future status is still unknown. It's worth noting that Carolina has a week 13 bye week, so he does get an extra week to recover without missing a game. When I saw the play, it looked like a knee tear, so good to hear that that isn't the case. The injury happened on the second to last Panthers series, so we didn't get to learn much about a Moore-less Panthers offense. The one drive we did see included a deep pass to Curtis Samuel, short dump off to Mike Davis, and a short pass to Robbie Anderson before a field goal attempt. In other words, not much changed for Carolina without Moore, but I'd expect more Christian McCaffrey and Curtis Samuel if Moore misses any time. Browns versus the Jaguars. So for the first time in like 3 weeks, the Browns didn't play a football game inside an active tornado or a hurricane or monsoon or whatever the heck those awful weather conditions were. As a result, Jarvis Landry had a huge day, 143 yards receiving, bringing in 8 of 11 targets. When the Browns have to pass the ball, it looks like Jarvis is going to be the alpha. But this is still very much a run-first offense. We saw 29 passes compared to 21 rushes. And Baker will hold him back a bit. Just want to note, Baker missed perhaps the most wide-open receiver in the end zone all year. It was awful. I think the guy was open by about 15 yards, and Baker still overthrew him. So Landry's a solid receiver moving forward, probably like a low-end wide receiver too. Giants versus the Bengals. Brandon Allen was approximately as bad as we expected, and he destroyed all the fantasy value of all the Bengals, including the running backs. T. Higgins salvaged his day with a touchdown, but that's probably the best you can hope for from any Bengal moving forward. Playing a Bengal is just going to be hoping they score one touchdown, because I really don't see a lot of 100-plus yard games from any Bengal running back or wide receiver. All right, the Cardinals versus the Patriots. Kyler was credited with 5 rushes in this game, but only 2 of those rushes were designed rushes as opposed to last resort scrambles. Particularly, Kyle had 0 designed rushes near the goal line. And that's not like the Cardinals didn't have green zone rushes. Kenyon Drake saw 6 rushes inside the 10-yard line. I think the Cardinals played it safe with Kyler's running due to the shoulder injury last week. Cost them the game, so hopefully they learned their lesson. Meanwhile, the Patriots also had their fair share of green zone rushing attempts. This game was pretty fun. There were a lot of goal line stands. In this game, of those 6 green zone attempts for the Patriots, Damian Harris had 2, which were both from outside the 5. Cam had 2, 1 from the 7 and 1 from the 1, which he failed to convert. And James White had 2, which both turned into touchdowns. Despite this split, Cam is still very much the goal line runner when they get in very close. By the way, I think James White's 2 touchdowns were a bit of variance, so I wouldn't get too excited. Dolphins versus Jets. Devontae Parker had nearly 3 times more targets than the second most targeted Dolphin, who's Mike Gesicki, which should tell you everything you need to know about the Dolphins' passing offense. Raiders versus Falcons. Josh Jacobs was injured in this game, and it didn't look pretty. He was in so much pain that he fumbled the ball. However, like DJ Moore, the injury looked worse than it apparently is, which the team is also calling an ankle injury. Devonta Booker would be a priority add behind a decent Oakland offensive line, especially considering that Booker was already involved in the passing game a bit. We didn't get to see too much of Booker after Jacobs was hurt, and what we did see involved Nathan Peterman at quarterback, so I'm not reading too much into the Oakland fourth quarter without Jacobs. I wouldn't spend too much on Booker unless he's going to be out long term. That said, he might help you win a week, and you should not be afraid to buy a win with fab dollars at this stage in the season, especially if you're contending for the playoffs or a first-round bye. Saints versus the Broncos. Taysom Hill is Alvin Kamara's kryptonite. In the Hill-led offense, Kamara has received 3 total targets over 2 weeks. Without that passing game usage, he's just a very talented running back and a well-established timeshare. Although it should be noted that Kamara's 48% snap count in Week 12 and being far out-carried by Latavius Murray was almost certainly related to the game never being in doubt. I mean, Denver didn't even have a real quarterback playing. But the worst news of all for Alvin Kamara is that he's not the goal line back anymore. It's Taysom Hill. Kamara got 0 green line carries, and instead the Saints preferred to use him as a decoy in those situations. They would run him in a pre-snap jet sweep to try and attract some defensive attention away from Taysom Hill's designed running lane. That's a big problem for many fantasy playoff teams riding Kamara. It's possible that Kamara's low usage, and particularly his low passing game usage, is tied to the fact that New Orleans has won the past two weeks without really breaking a sweat against lesser-than opponents. But New Orleans gets Atlanta and Philly over the next 2 weeks, who they should also walk all over. It's not until Week 15 when they get to play the Chiefs that they again compete against strong opponent. I have no advice other than ride it out, but Kamara's outlook isn't great with Hill at quarterback. I'd be ranking him as an RB2 until we see some passing game usage. 49ers versus the Rams. Here's a fun stat. Deebo Samuel had an average air yards per target of 1.6, yet he still accumulated 133 total receiving yards. He's a beast when the ball is in his hands. I just wish we could see how Kyle Shanahan intends to use both him and Brandon Ayuk together. They both do a lot of the same things well, so the question becomes, can Shanahan design enough gimmick plays for both of them to be fantasy viable? We haven't seen them share the field yet this year, so it's hard to find any future-pointing trends until we see it. Chiefs versus the Buccaneers. Sammy Watkins returned from injury and immediately returned to his old role, playing about 75% of the snaps and turning 5+ targets into negligible yardage. The big thing that we can learn here is that his return pushed Mecole Hardman out of any playing time, as he only played 30% of the snaps, because the Chiefs clearly prefer Watkins and Demarcus Robinson over Hardman. Passing offense remains highly concentrated between Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, though. So Hardman is nothing more than a handcuff, I guess, for Tyreek Hill at this point, which has value, but if you need to drop him, that's fine. Bears versus Packers. David Montgomery returned from his concussion, and he looked really strong in his first game back. It's true he only received 11 carries, but that was almost entirely game script related. Plus, he was incredibly efficient, gaining 103 yards on those 11 carries. Thanks, crappy Green Bay run defense. Still, he played 85% of snaps and saw 6 targets, including a goal line screen designed for him, which resulted in a touchdown. He's a true workhorse in a below-average offense, but really any workhorse has value, especially regardless of offense. Just ask James Robinson. All right, thanks again for watching. Everyone stay safe and healthy. Again, I'm Nate Henry. I'll see you next week.